Hello, everyone. This is Natalie with Marketing Resolution. Thanks once again for joining us on the YouTube channel where we talk about all things mediation, arbitration, ombuds, dispute review boards, etc. Today, I am talking to Chris LaHatte in Wellington, New Zealand. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Thanks very much for joining me. New Zealand is one of the prettier places on earth, and I can say that because I grew up in an equally pretty place, Idaho, in the United States. So, well, Chris, I wanted to chat to you a little bit. I know that you have a very diverse practice, that you have aspects of family, business to business, you do construction, employment, all different kinds of cases. But I know that from talking to you that you are, at this particular moment, really enthusiastic about the family and divorce aspect of your practice. Can you give us a little description about your practice and tell us more about what you do there for your fellow citizens in Wellington?
Sure. I work with a number of providers, the main one of which is a company called Fairway Resolution. That's a little bit of a plug for them. And Fairway assign family mediators to disputes over parenting decisions that people have to make once they separate. And it's quite a good system because they arrange for people to come in. They give them some of the pre-mediation counselling, which is important to prepare them. And then they contact me and I then organise to have the people come in. And I have generally separate meetings first, of course, and then get them in and we have a session and try and work out some sort of parenting plan. And it's quite a diverse range of problems. At the end of the year, we often end up with people who can't agree on where the children are going to be at Christmas, that sort of thing. So it's quite common to get the urgent mediation where you have to deal with one or two discrete issues. But then often you'll have the need to have longer-term parenting plans drawn out. And I love working with people to help them with that. It's just great to reconnect with people. And I've had some really good experiences. For some reason, it's not uncommon for parents these days just to seeing each other in person. And it's probably a social media thing that often you'll talk to the parents and find out that they've only been communicating by email or text or Facebook messaging or whatever, and they haven't actually clapped eyes on each other for quite a long time. And it's made me very aware of the need to have people in the same space to have successful mediations over issues like parenting. Other sorts of mediation you can do online using Skype or Zoom or whatever platform, but the deep emotional needs of care of children parenting do need to have the people in the same place, I find. I know some American practices that the parties never actually come into the same room, and I don't understand how you can successfully mediate without the couple actually looking at each other and using all the tools we learn about from a very early age, the body language, all of that sort of thing. And as the mediator, I watch them all the time and listen, of course, because for family mediation, like many other mediations, it's often not what they're talking about, which is the problem. And that's where you have to dig in sometimes and ask those questions to really sort out what is the problem. I had one fairly recently where it turned out they were able to agree on everything, but there's still a huge amount of tension. And it turned out that one of them wanted to take the child overseas. which was going to be, of course, a really, really difficult issue. And they hadn't been talking about that, and I couldn't quite sense why there was still this underlying tension. So digging out those issues is incredibly important, and I don't think could have been achieved by doing an online mediation. And then I had a lovely one a while ago where the parties had, as I've said, just been communicating electronically, and they met each other for the first time. And I had some independent feedback, and I won't mention what sort of feedback it was because it might identify them, that after the mediation they had continued to meet in person again from time to time. And it was just lovely to hear that I've been able to restore a little bit more harmony in their relationship. Not that they were ever going to get back together, of course, but being able to communicate in a more civil and human fashion, that was so important.
Yeah, and then now you just used that word that I know that you have a great passion for and have been doing a lot of study about, and that you use in your practice, and that is restore. And I know that recently you've been studying restorative justice and those kinds of communication skills, listening skills, and process skills so that you can better help your clients that are in mediation or even arbitration. And so can you describe what the swords of insertion are when you're using restorative justice practices for your clients?
Well, sometimes you need to recognize that one party might have done something to the other party which has been harmful in some way, and the other party might not have even recognized that as harmful behavior. So you need to unpick what has been done and then get the parties to recognize that harm, and then look at things like getting under their skin with them and saying, well, why do you think that hurt the other person? And what do you think you can do that would make that better? And whether that's an apology or changing behaviours or a whole range of other things. But what I'm conscious about as well is that that's not something you can fix in 1 or 2 mediation sessions. You have to assist the parties to take their relationship to a different sort of level. And again, I'm not talking about getting them back together, but I often say to people, well, you know, you're both going to be the parents of these children until, in New Zealand law, they have responsibility until they're 18. So if the children are quite young, you know, they've got 10, 15 years ahead of having to have a relationship of some sort. And if you're going to spend that 10 or 15 years hating each other and plotting each other's downfall, it's a pretty grim life. So restoring the relationship, and that doesn't even mean that you have to like each other terribly much, but if you can operate on a reasonably civil level and agree on the important things for the children, that's absolutely critical. Because something you have to remember in these mediations, of course, is that you're not actually there primarily for the parents, you're there for the children. So everything you do has got to be with the thought of what's in the best interests of those children. And it's got sometimes nothing to do with what the parents want. You know, and you can be cynical because occasionally parents say, well, I want equal parenting time, and you unpick that and you find out it's because they're paying a lot more child support. And if you can share out the parenting time, it reduces their child support liability, which is a dreadful thing in one sense, but you know, people are human. They think along those lines sometimes.
Sure. Now, this kind of communication, this kind of interaction that you have with clients, I can see how it would be extraordinarily valuable to the cases that you hear in workplace conflict, human resource issues, supplier, buyer, contracts, those kinds of things. And I know that in your practice you do a lot of employment kinds of cases. And this restorative idea, you know, you and I have talked about the relationships developed in the workplace, and how a lot of people don't give them credit for being as deep or as meaningful as they frequently are.
You're absolutely right. Uh, you see, as we were talking about, your employer sometimes, or your worker, sometimes more than you might see your romantic partner. And you have to get on, because otherwise life is just hell for you. And you could sometimes see some awful cases, and helping the parties restore that relationship. There are some very good studies done on restoring those relationships without actually having to dismiss people from a workplace. And in fact, recently, I've seen some quite interesting ideas. For example, an employer client of mine recently decided that she had just started in her HR role, and so she gave one worker a clean slate. This particular worker had had various issues, and so she said to her, well, let's wipe everything off and we'll start again. And those sorts of creative ideas can be great for restoring the relationship, you know, or repairing the relationship, and just getting people back onto a more even keel. And it's great when you can be creative with people to bring about ideas on how to resolve those sorts of issues. And it's probably the biggest thrill of any mediator's practice is to achieve those little breakthroughs that mean that people no longer hate each other quite as deeply, and are actually communicating on a better level.
Sure. Well, now I can see that in a family and divorce case, the positive trickle down affects their children. It probably affects their neighbors, their parents. It has a really positive trickle down. And in a workplace environment, the trickle down would be to other employees. It would be to other individuals on the management team. It would be to shareholders. The positive trickle down of repairing these kinds of relationships is enormous. When you get your life settled at work, like you said, a lot of us spend more time at work than we spend at home with our own families. And so when those kinds of tensions and anxieties, when those kinds of conflicts can be repaired or erased, in some way ameliorated, then we at home are better spouses, better parents, better neighbors. And so utilizing these processes and these programs and these ideas, these practices that you're talking about, I think have a tremendous benefit, not just to the individual that's in your room, but to society at large, honestly.
Yeah, you're quite right. We get hung up sometimes on punishment of these things. Revenge and punishment are really quite primitive emotions that we feel. So, when someone has done something bad to you, you do want to punish them in some way. And the reason for wanting to punish them is often because you feel disempowered, you feel hurt, you want to somehow sort out the problem. If people can then develop tools to restore and repair and apologize and put things right, then the need for revenge and punishment somehow seems to evaporate.
It is such an impressive impact that someone like you can have on, just people, just regular, ordinary people who get stuck, letting little issues become big issues and big issues become conflict. And, we can spend, a handful of hours with somebody like you and maybe undo or even fix a lot of those things that we've just let, become the ruling and controlling power in our lives. And then, it lets us, get restful sleep. It lets us, smile again. It lets us, go back to living our lives as opposed to allowing a conflict or a dispute to rule our lives. So,
yeah, and it's you have to recognise that when you're mediating in those sorts of cases, that it's the parties themselves who then take those steps to restore that peace and harmony and relationships. My job is really just to nudge them along to unblock all of those things which are preventing them from doing that themselves. And once they do it themselves, that's I can quietly back out and disappear. So it's helping the people develop the skills to avoid conflict. That's important.
And I think that that ownership that they feel in the process and in the eventual outcome is what gives it such great power, because it's their resolution, it's their solution. It's all about them, and that's a really lovely thing.
Yeah, in all my years as a court lawyer, you learn to tell people after a while. They could say, well, you can sort this out between each other and sort out something that you're more or less happy with. Or you can go down to the courtroom and have a judge tell you what your life is going to be. And when you put it like that, people get it pretty quickly. And I spend a lot of time talking people out of going to court, which sounds counterintuitive for someone who used to largely make a living out of representing people in court. But I would regard matters that go to court as often as not, that's a failure. There are always going to be some cases that end up there because, there are issues of law or perhaps important points which need to be made. But I think the vast majority of court cases could be resolved by the parties themselves with a facilitator. And hopefully that's the path we're going down in the future, rather than having long and complicated and expensive court cases. The other thing, of course, too, is that court cases are really only for the wealthy. And I think that's the case anywhere in the world. In many countries, legal aid systems have systematically been demolished or reduced in impact. And so we see a lot more parties appearing for themselves in court. And sadly, when they're up against an experienced lawyer, it can be sometimes a rather awful experience. And people don't understand the more sophisticated concepts. But often underlying those conflicts, although they're dressed in a complicated legal ideas, there are people issues which underlie it. And if you resolve the people issues, you don't need to figure out what the law of that particular problem should be.
And I think that, when I was growing up, the sort of mantra was that you should always be gentle with people. You can be as hard as you want on the issues, but you should always be gentle with the people. And
Yes.
And in the court, you don't always get that. But in a mediation setting, you do have the opportunity to be gentle with humans. You can be hard on the issues, get all of those issues resolved, set aside, whatever the solution might be, and still be gentle with people, because that is a really important aspect of what we do as mediators and arbitrators, is to remember that we're dealing with humans. So. Yeah. Well, Chris, I really appreciate the time that you've set aside. Thank you so much for talking to us about your practice there in Wellington. And I want to mention your website so that if people have questions either about the New Zealand culture, the practices in New Zealand, finding solutions in New Zealand, the court programs in New Zealand. I want people to be able to contact you. And you have a really, really good website, by the way, with a fantastic blog. It's chock-a-block full of resources. So let's send people to your website. It's LaHatte, LaHatte.lawyer. And
Yes.
you can contact Chris there. And of course, I will put that in the description bar down below. And I can't thank you enough for setting aside some of your valuable time this evening. I really appreciate it, Chris.
Right. And perhaps I should finish off by saying that there is a Maori saying that applies to mediation, and they say, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. And that translates to mean it is the people, the people, the people. And that's what we do as mediators.
I love that. He tangata,
He tangata, he tangata, he tangata.
What a great thing to learn. Thank you, Chris. That's fantastic. Well, everybody, like I said, I'll put all of the information in the description bar. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and share. If you find yourself in need of a mediator, then this is a great resource for you. If you know someone who's having some difficulty, then again, share this video with them, and we'll get the resources that they need to them. Well, Chris, again, so pleasurable talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Natalie.
All right.
Okay.
Hitanata, hitanata, hitanata.
Well, more or less.
I'll work on it. All right.
Don't ask me to say it in French.
Oh, well, I couldn't say it in French either. All right. Thanks very much, Chris.
Okay, bye.